there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
But the people
I'm
on
taking
television
it from the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Hi, my name's Ana Marie Cox. This is 90 Days with Ana Marie Cox, and it is 54 days into the election. Last night, we had a debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And this show, we talk about what's going on in this election with smart people. And I could not think of anyone I wanted to talk to more about last night's debate than friend of the pod, Beto O'Rourke, who is former senatorial and gubernatorial candidate, 2 very high-profile debates right there, got some experience with this, as well as the co-founder and volunteer for Powered by People, which is a voter registration organization. I want to talk to you about that piece of the puzzle. But first, what'd you think?
I mean, these last couple of months have just made me so happy and leave me feeling so optimistic, not just about our chances in November, but just about this country and what we're capable of. And that's literally embodied in Kamala Harris. The confidence that she displayed last night, the command of not just policy and issues. We know she's really smart. Everybody knows she's really smart. For her, that was a low bar. But her ability to dominate Donald Trump, who, if we're honest with ourselves, has dominated every other person that he's ever debated against, whether we like his style, whether we like what comes out of his mouth, whether we like what he represents, in terms of just brute strength, brute political power on a debate stage, there has been no one stronger in my lifetime until Kamala Harris last night. And the way that she was able to do that so artfully, so persuasively, and so effectively, to get under this guy's skin and to have him, playing the tune that she had set out. Crowd size was a great example. I mean, this was the one, it was on the immigration question. Like, he should have just knocked that way the fuck out of the park. And instead he says, I'm going to get to this really important thing that my whole candidacy and really my life has been about for, since 2015. And I'm going to talk about my crowds. Oh, it's so good. And I was watching with my 13-year-old son, Henry. The rest of the family was out of the house. And he was cracking up laughing. Like, you can be 13 years old and understand who is dominating this debate. And it doesn't have to come through raising your voice or yelling over the other person. It can come through humor and a connection that is, fear is a powerful connection. Humor is a profoundly powerful connection. She just nailed it. And I'm so happy about it.
And she didn't actually use the word weird, which I was kind of hoping that she would. But her attitude was of the one that doesn't call back, isn't afraid to call someone weird, right? Her attitude embodied what calling these folks weird has done for the left, which is to say they're not just dangerous, they're dangerously out of the mainstream, right? And she radiated you're weird rather than saying you're weird. Although I do think if she actually said it, he would have stroked out. Like, it would have just fried his brain more than it's already fried. What I thought was interesting, I've never debated on obviously that kind of stage, but did a little bit of high school debate. And I've observed a lot of it and I've argued with people. What was amazing to me, and this goes to the confidence piece, is that she did a very risky thing. I want you to speak to it, which is that she did bait him, right? And I think that that's a risky thing to do for a candidate on stage, right? It has to be done very artfully. You can't be obvious. Did you observe that too? Did you see that kind of little twist of the knob, just enough? mentioning the crowd size was the most obvious one, but kind of getting him to go off.
I like the way that you put it, and that you pointed out that she didn't say weird. And because of the way that she prosecuted the case and the response she elicited from Trump, she didn't have to do that. It's one thing to say, my opponent is weird. Take my word for it. It's another thing to set him up with an obvious trap that, the lowest IQ candidate could anticipate, right? Hey, you're going to go into this debate with Kamala Harris. They've been calling you weird. They want to see you unhinged. You stay, Donald Trump, focused on the economy, on immigration, on inflation, on these core lines of attack that you can absolutely dominate her on. And instead, weirdly, strangely, he takes the bait. And then, as you know, and anyone who watched this, he then goes into absolutely bizarre territory. In Springfield, they're eating the cats. They're eating the dogs. And if you didn't already make the connection, he then says they're eating the pets. And David Muir's, fact checks in real time. He's like, hold on a second. We called the city manager. That is actually not happening. There's literally not a single verified reported case of this happening. And Trump's like, well, that might be fine and nice for the city manager to say. That's what you would expect him to say. But I saw this stuff on TV. And I think people at home, like, even I watched the Republic for like 20 minutes. I watched CNN and, like the sole Republican MAGA guy on the panel. Even he had to concede that what Trump did was absolutely bizarre. And I think the best defense that they could mount was, ABC was in the tank for Kamala Harris, and it was 3-on-1. I saw a lot of those comments. But even in that framing, you're admitting that your guy absolutely lost. And then if you're honest, he really did this to himself with a masterful assist by Kamala Harris. I thought it was wonderful.
It was wonderful, and it felt different than other debates. And I felt different than other debates, not just other debates that Trump has done. It felt different from every other presidential debate I've ever seen. And I think I want to acknowledge that part of that, and I'm going to get a little emotional, is seeing a Black woman, a woman of East Asian descent up there, a woman, just being confident in her own skin and just not afraid to laugh, not afraid to roll her eyes. And again, important phrasing, prosecuting the case. What felt different? Did it feel that different to you? Is it just we've been so beaten down by Trump being on stage, or did it feel different in any other way to you?
Yeah, I was thinking about trying to put myself in Vice President Harris's shoes yesterday ahead of the debate. I've been in some debates, never, of course, anything at this level or profile, but you're loaded down with all this prep. You've done this opposition research. There are these things that people who love and care about you are like, hey, Beto, you got to get this point across, okay? And make sure if you say nothing else, you say the following things. And if this issue comes up, make sure that you respond in this way. And that can be overwhelming for a candidate. And then in addition, the conventional and I think commonly held true wisdom is Trump really didn't have a whole bunch to lose. His supporters are going absolutely nowhere. I mean, there's literally nothing that this guy can say and do at this point that will drop any support, I think, from those who believe in him. Kamala Harris, the worry has been, did she peak post-convention? And was that her ceiling? And is she dropping down? That recent New York Times poll over the weekend, I think, caused a lot of anxiety for a lot of people that might, in fact, be true. So this debate for her and her team, literally everything is riding on it. And we would understand, and she would be forgiven for maybe cracking a little bit under that pressure. So to answer your question, what I took from this, it seems so different from any performance that I've ever witnessed before, is for that much pressure on that one person's back. And for her not only to shoulder it, but to do so seemingly effortlessly. You mentioned the smile and the laughter. How about that chin pose where She's like looking at Trump. She's like, did you really just fucking say what you just said? Like, and she was communicating to us visually, hey, America, are you seeing what I'm seeing right now? Are you listening to the same shit show train wreck of a former president that is standing to my right? I've just never seen anybody do anything like that. And, you know, at first, when I was watching the commentary afterwards on CNN, people were saying that might have been the worst debate performance ever, meaning Trump. And that might have been the best performance ever, meaning Harris. And I thought, well, that's spin, that's hyperbole, that's recency bias, whatever you want to call it. But, you know, with a night's sleep under my belt, I don't think that is wrong. And so I do think this is kind of a singular moment in American history in terms of a presidential candidate's performance on a national stage. She hadn't given but one formal interview, since she had become the nominee. There's a lot of genuine curiosity about her, some griping, like, I don't know, she doesn't have a policy page on her website. They just put it up, I think, yesterday or the day before. Where is she on this issue? Where are the specifics? Why did she change her positions? All of that coming into this. And I don't know how one could do better than she did. So that's what I think was so different and again, unique and singular about this.
And the bar was so high. I guess that's where I go with like her unique, like what she brings to it as a historic candidate. You know, you're right. Like yesterday we had Charlotte Clymer on, and Charlotte talked about all she really needs to do is check some boxes, right? And I think that she just did that and more with this. She's like the Simone Biles of presidential candidates right now. Just like taking that bounce off of the floor and soaring and doing something so difficult no one else can do. But I think you and I could talk about the debate itself for another half hour. But something happened after the debate that also historic, might wind up being more influential, which is this celebrity that some people may have heard of. Like, the name recognition's up there. Taylor Swift not just endorsed Harris and Walz, but like articulated her case about why, dug into the historic nature of this campaign, and I know something near and dear to your heart, emphasized the importance of registering and actually getting out. So as a candidate, former candidate, as an observer, what was your reaction to the Instagram post heard around the world?
I saw a screenshot of it on Twitter, and I thought, this is too good to be true. This is a hoax. This is AI. And so I went to Instagram. I followed Taylor Swift. I saw the post, and Ana, you're absolutely right. It wasn't glib. It wasn't, in passing. It was this incredibly thoughtful statement. And at the end of it, she says to all of her fans, because as you know, because you've probably seen the documentary on her, she's been through these decisions before in her life. Do I compromise part of my fan base? Do I open myself up to these attacks by getting politically involved? Or do I do as Michael Jordan did in that opportunity to endorse an historic candidacy in North Carolina for a Senate race? Do I just say, Republicans and Democrats alike buy my records? I just don't want to piss them off. And so this incredibly talented, principled, successful person lays out her thought process. And then at the end, she says, look, I did my research. I did the due diligence. You should as well. But more than anything, I want to make sure that you register to vote, and then includes, at least on her IG story, the actual link to register to vote. And, no one is polling, I don't think, in any serious, effective, successful, truly reflective way, 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds, because if they're unregistered as of yesterday, they are definitionally not part of the electorate and not part of a pollster's, sample. They are getting registered today, and they're going to be getting registered tomorrow. And in Texas, the voter registration deadline is October 7th. Our group, Powered by People, we're on campuses across the state. In fact, I'm going to be holding events at UT Austin, University of Texas at San Antonio, University of North Texas, University of Texas at Arlington, University of Houston, Texas Tech in Lubbock. Ana knows what that means to be in Lubbock. The rest of the country might not realize that's conventionally held to be one of the most conservative places on the planet. And yet there are a lot of Taylor Swift fans who go to Tech, who are 18, 19 years old, who are going to be getting registered with us. That was a game changer, a big one. And one personal story. So in 18, when we were running against Cruz, towards the end of that race, we really started to catch fire and wound up with a lot of wonderful celebrity endorsements. Willie Nelson, who'd been with us literally from the beginning, of course, like my all-time hero. It just doesn't get better than that. LeBron James walking on to, from the locker room onto the court wearing a Beto hat. And then on election day, none other than Beyonce, perhaps the most famous person to ever emerge from the state of Texas, she posts on Instagram an endorsement. She's wearing the Beto hat. And that I think came up 3 hours into voting on election day. And I always wondered, who knows? Popularity is not necessarily transferable. Do these endorsements make as big a difference as we hope they do? I just wondered if Beyonce, and we thank the Lord for her, period, and that she endorsed us whenever she did. But if that had come earlier, what might that have done? And I think we can answer that question with Taylor Swift, who is, I don't know, is she the most popular performer on the planet or in America, at least right now? I don't know, but she's one of them. And this is going to change the course of the next 54 days for sure. That was huge.
I'm really glad you brought up the power or the lack of power of celebrity endorsements, because I was at that Willie Nelson concert with you. I don't know if you remember. And it was electrifying. It was so wonderful. And I remember all of that hope and all of that sense that everything could change. I remember all those endorsements. And they wound up not making a difference, in part perhaps because they came too late. But to get back to Taylor, she did endorse in 2016 for reasons that I think understandable. Like she thought being a celebrity might actually wind up backfiring because Trump had weaponized celebrity. She did endorse Tennessee candidates in 2018. Do you think the nature of a celebrity endorsement has changed today? Like, does it mean something different in addition to doing it early enough to make a difference in voting?
It's a really good question. And I would say that in 2018, celebrity endorsements didn't put us over the line because I just don't think it's possible for celebrity power to accomplish that. I think it helps marginally, but in very tight elections, the margins matter. So in Texas, in addition to Willie Nelson, Spoon, Bun B, we mentioned Beyonce, stars big and small in every genre and really in every kind of celebrity, from sports to music to filmmaking and beyond. Richard Linklater was making ads for the Texas Senate race. It was really amazing. And I don't think I would have done as well without their help. And I'm forever grateful for it because they connected with parts of the electorate that may have been tuned out or may have said, Beto, he's just another politician. And Richard Linklater or Bun B or Spoon are saying, no, listen to this guy. We're behind him. Check him out. So that helps. And I think Taylor Swift is going to be helping Kamala for sure. And, the margins in Pennsylvania, the margins are the margins of victory. She could help get Kamala over the line. So we know this is tough for someone like Taylor Swift, who is about as universally beloved as one can be at this incredibly polarized, divided moment. And she knows she does this at some sacrifice to her standing among some part of her fans. And, she's been through this before. The 2018 Senate race in Tennessee, there's in the documentary, you can see her team advising her against getting involved. Hey, Taylor, you're a performer. You have an audience. You take care of that stuff and let the politics take care of itself. Taylor Swift gets it. We live in a democracy and there are no sidelines for anyone. And the price of participation, The price of being in this country versus North Korea or Saudi Arabia or Russia is that we've got to be involved, and we don't get to not have an opinion or a say or a vote. So I'm just so happy about the decision she made. It makes me like Taylor Swift even more. I didn't know that was possible. And I do think it's going to help Kamala Harris. Even if it's marginal, that margin matters.
I also think there's just something that's changed in our culture, because I also remember in 2018 when you got all those endorsements, there was this attempt by the Republicans to be like, see, he's just the celebrity candidate, right? They tried to weaponize those celebrity endorsements against you. And I think something that's changed a little bit, I can't believe, and not a little bit, I think something changed kind of a lot in just those 6 years, is the nature of celebrity is that, well, celebrities are maybe even more important, bigger, whatever. They're also, the parasocial relationship is like a little more direct, you know? Like, to attack Taylor Swift is to attack me, right? I mean, if I'm a fan, it feels personal. And if I'm a fan, if I'm a Swiftie, the relationship is really personal. That arena can be enormous, but the relationship feels like I get her, she gets me, you know? So I think that's different. I think that goes to the 18, 19, 20-year-olds. We,
in 22, when I was running for governor, we got this wonderful call from Harry Styles' team. And he said, hey, he's doing I can't remember, a 5-night stand at the Moody in Austin, and he'd love for you to come. And we're like, well, we're big Harry Styles fans. Thank you for the invitation, but we've got a race to run. And they said, no, you're probably going to want to come to this one. And we did. And, you know, we had a chance to hang out with him backstage. And the funniest thing, Ana, he, you know, who knows what the story is in the lead up to this, but we shake hands and I said, hey, thank you for having us out. This is truly wonderful. And he said, I watched the debate between you and Abbott, you know, last Friday night, you know, fantastic job. And whether he watched the debate or someone told him to say that he watched the debate, man, that felt so good. You know, Abbott had scheduled the debate on a Friday night during football season in the state of Texas, you know, say no more. And this guy was tuning in. But obviously the best part of the story is when he takes the stage, his guitar has a big Beto sticker on it. And he is signaling to every young person in that arena, if you care about reproductive health care, if you care about school shootings, if you care about treating people with respect and dignity, regardless of whether they're straight or gay or transgender or whatever, this is your guy. And so obviously we didn't win the race and he didn't get us over the top. But what he did do, when I'm on these college campuses now, as I've been for, you know, the entire semester, and I will be through the voter registration deadline, and I'm helping to register these young people, so many of them say, the only reason I care about politics or know who you are, Beto, is because of Harry Styles. So these folks are able to break through. And will it produce what we want in the moment? Not always, but it will contribute over time to what we're looking for, which is what, you know, Taylor Swift is focused on, is I want to make sure that you're registered and in the game so that you yourself have a vote and have a voice in that. That for our democracy, and yes, for Kamala Harris, but also for elections down the road, is just incredibly powerful and important.
Yeah, I think as we're talking, I kind of feel like I am happy that the narrative even that you and I are talking about is shifting a little bit, because obviously Obama got all these celebrity endorsements as well. And I think in the story that consultants and pundits tell, there is an emphasis on those celebrity endorsements. But as you're saying, those probably help on the margins, perhaps. But the real difference that a celebrity endorsement can make is getting people involved in the process, right? It's not even the direct endorsement of the candidate. It's saying politics is a thing that I care about. And if you buy the same shoes that I do, if you like are interested in copying my look, if you trust me on these, you know, sort of ways of being in the world, then perhaps you can also trust that this is a thing that's important and to pay attention to and to make your voice heard on. And that's
absolutely.
That's where it can really help.
It's interesting. So I've been registering voters at El Paso Community College the last 2 weeks. And, you'll get into conversations. Why do you want to get registered? Or why do you not want to get registered? Or what do you think about this election? And one of the responses I get that's pretty frequent is, how do you know what's going on, Beto? Like, how do you, they're asking about how you get news, but like, what's happening? What's the truth? How do I find out about these people? And it struck me, they're not subscribers to the El Paso Times. They may not know about the free, high-quality news source in El Paso. It's called El Paso Matters. They may not read the Texas Tribune. They certainly don't subscribe to the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. And so they're getting their information via TikTok and Twitter and Instagram, and very often memes and graphics and visual connections to what's happening in the world. So to your point, Taylor Swift, not just pictured with the cat saying, "I'm for Kamala," but describing why she is for Kamala. And this is a trusted source for tens of millions of young voters across this country. I mean, it's going to be at the margins. That might be a very high marginal impact. And even if all that you get out of that is an increase in registration, say 10% more registered young people than you otherwise would have had, and Kamala Harris now has a chance to fight for those young voters. And I think if you contrast those two candidates, their platforms, and even their style, as we saw on the stage last night, Kamala's going to win that 18, 19, 20-year-old vote, hands down. I wouldn't say that she could take it for granted. It's not hers until she earns it. But with Taylor Swift's help and these new registrations, whether she's doing it or we're doing it here in Texas, that's a front that we want to be fighting on, because I know that we can win. And again, I don't think that's included in anybody's polls right now or projections. That's kind of this secret weapon that may or may not materialize. In past elections, it hasn't, frankly. In some, it comes through with flying colors. In 2018, young voter turnout in Texas was up like 506% from the previous midterm. I think in part because of all of these celebrities who got in and woke people up to the race that was taking place, but also because we were on college campuses all the time, meeting with people who had been taken for granted or written off. And Taylor Swift is bringing them in.
So a few questions I feel like you're especially well positioned to answer. One is, when do we get to find out about those registrations? Is that going to be something that can be measured? And when would we find out that if this endorsement made a difference?
So I don't know how the hell they do this, because it's hard to get data out of the Texas Secretary of State. But I saw on Twitter, so it must be true, some guy who I guess models, as for those, Ana knows this, but for those outside of Texas, you may not know, we don't have partisan registration in the state. So you don't register as a Democrat or Republican. You register as a voter in Texas, and then you can elect to vote in the Republican primary or the Democratic primary. You got to pick one. But you could, the next election, if you voted in the Republican primary, this one, you could vote in the Democratic primary. But somehow they are able to pin people down on likely partisanship. And at this point, before the 2020 election, the difference between Republican registrations and Democratic registrations was, this is directionally correct, I can't remember the exact number, it was like Republicans plus 16. In this election, same point in time ahead of 2024 presidential contest, it's like Democrats up 12. So a huge, huge swing. I don't know what that is. 28 points swing difference between 16 and 12. And is that Kamala? Is it Joe Biden stepping aside? Is it the registration efforts that Powered by People and Move and Jolt and all these amazing organizations across the state of Texas are pursuing? Is it the down ballot candidates running for State House, United States Congress, Justice of the Peace? I don't know, but it is great news. So we're already starting to get some data about what happened pre-Taylor Swift. It'll be really interesting to come back to you and say, hey, with 2 weeks after Taylor Swift's endorsement, here's what we've seen in terms of this split between Republican and Democratic registrations. But it bodes very, very, very well, especially because in one recent poll, Colin Allred, who's running against Ted Cruz, was down 2% within the margin of error. In that same poll, I think Kamala Harris is down 3% to Donald Trump in the state of Texas. I'm not making predictions that either Allred or Harris will win Texas, but I'm telling you that it is possible. And if you get a couple of, tens of thousands of new young voters who are on no one's radar, who are predisposed to vote for Allred and Kamala, it may just happen. So I'm pretty excited about it. And listen, you mentioned the number of days until November 5th. My big target is October 7th. That's the voter registration deadline in Texas. After that, I can't bring anybody new in. And I'll tell you from being on the campaign trail in Texas in 18 and in 22, so often down the home stretch, we'd be doing events on college campuses and folks would be like, hey, I'm so excited to vote for you, Beto. Where do I register? And I'd say, that registration deadline was 2 weeks ago. You missed it. So we want to make sure everyone that we can possibly bring into this contest is there, ready to vote and ready to win this thing. And I think something special is going to happen in Texas.
And to get just a little bit into this, isn't horse race. This is more just the nuts and bolts of elections. If Harris possibly swings Texas, it's over. Game over. Electoral map wise, or electoral college wise. If she wins everywhere else, she needs to win. It's done.
Maybe you can help answer this question. It's the biggest political mystery in America to me that, to your point, Texas has 40 electoral college votes. So if a Democrat were to win Texas, there is literally no other conceivable path for a Republican into the White House. They would have to flip 5 reliably blue states, 5 states to make up for the electoral college haul that Texas has. And as I've shared with you, Obama lost in 2012 by 16 points in Texas. Hillary lost by 9 points in Texas. Biden lost by 5.5 points in Texas. That dramatic change, which is the greatest transition from red to blue anywhere in the country. Texas is moving faster into the blue column than any other state in the country. That has happened without any outside intervention. No DNC money, no presidential nominee visiting the state to campaign. They may come here to raise money, but they don't come here to rally, campaign, and turn out the vote. In Georgia in 2020, which did flip, they spent $28 per likely Democratic voter. In that same year, in Texas, we spent $7 per likely Democratic voter. The mystery, the question I have for you and for my party is, given those stakes, given the crushing defeat that we could hand Republicans if we were to win Texas, given the blueprint that we saw Stacey Abrams and the New Georgia Project and so many other partners pull off in a state that is not unlike demographically, not unlike Texas, why isn't every additional dollar coming into this state to produce that victory? I mean, if you want to go on offense, yes, we got to clean up in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia for sure. I get that. But putting some money, some resources, and yes, even some time in Texas, if it's not 24, then it's 28 or it's 32. But you cannot wait till those later years to start the fight. As we learned in Georgia, you got to start it right now. So excellent point that you made. And my question is, why aren't national Democrats following up on this great opportunity here?
I mean, you probably have more ears than I do. It's a mystery to me. I mean, I think send Walz here to go to some Friday night games. Send coach
yes.
in, right?
Midland.
Send him to some Austin area, football games where they would go fucking nuts, right? Because Austin, so blue, it's like a black hole of blue, oh, in my neighborhood, there are so many signs. There's so many. And some of them are homemade, which is very sweet. I think one of the signs in my neighborhood says Harris Walz, duh.
I love Austin. You really don't get that.
Yeah, but I want to get to why aren't they here? They should be here. They totally should be here because also, well, Texas. I think there's the reasons why it might not work and the reasons why it worked. The reasons why it might not work is the voter suppression stuff has even worse than it was 2 years ago,
That's
4
right.
years ago. The Republicans know the state of the game that you're talking
Absolutely.
about. They see the writing on the wall. And so they've just gone to town, trying to close polling sites, fuck up registration, make it really hard to vote on all kinds of levels. And yet those numbers keep getting better, right? So the tide is turning against them. And I also think that Dobbs decision, I'm going to get emotional again. Like, I have friends who have had to leave the state to get reproductive care. Like, every woman I know has friends who that's happened to, right? And then there's all the stories that you see, the terrible stories about women almost bleeding out in parking lots and being, having life-threatening pregnancies. But in Texas, infant mortality has gone up 12%. And there's a bunch of white women in suburbs who it's happening to their friends too. So that's a tragedy that you don't want to turn tragedies into political capital. But between that and school shootings, people are ready to vote for Democrats here. Right? And I also think they need to work on this now, even if they don't win, because people will start leaving.
Yes, absolutely. And look, money isn't everything for sure. There's so many other factors to a winning campaign, but you laid out perfectly the terrain in Texas. You have the most voter suppressive state in the country, harder to cast a ballot, harder to register to vote in Texas. And it's not hard for me as a white guy in El Paso. It is hard for young people, including college students. It is hard for those with disabilities. They've made this already tough process that much more onerous. If you need assistance because you literally cannot write or you can't get to a polling location, the certification for your assistant is so almost impossible for people that they literally just are not going to vote as intended. Closing polling places, as you mentioned, in the fastest growing Black and brown neighborhoods so that the line to vote on election day is 7, 8, 9 hours long. You could not find fault with a single person who said, fuck this. I'm not waiting in line for 9 hours. I don't have 9 hours to wait in line, okay? I'm working 2 jobs. I'm taking care of my folks. I'm raising my kids, whatever the problem is. Or you just don't want to suffer the indignity. No one blames you. I blame this country. I blame our state. I blame the people in positions of power. But then you look at money, and I mentioned the 28 invested per voter in Georgia versus the 7 in Texas. When I ran against Abbott in 22, we raised and spent $80 million. That's a lot. Abbott raised and spent $150 million. So it was almost 2 to 1 on the money. Plus he has every lever of power at his disposal. Plus he's rigged the voting laws here to effectively disenfranchise people who are part of our coalition. And no wonder you get some of the outcomes. And you also made a great point in the fact that this is not static. I mean, the voting laws in Texas were bad in 2018. When we did so well, they changed them in 2019. When Biden did so well in 20, they changed them in 2021. They changed them again in 2023. They're making this harder and harder because they see what you and I are looking at, which is it is inevitable that Republicans are going to lose power. That trajectory that we described earlier from 16 to 9 to 5.5 with Biden, it's only going to continue until it gets to 0 and then flips on to our side. They're trying to forestall that by removing polling locations from the Texas A&M campus. You thought of it as a bastion of conservatism. There are a lot of young progressive students from this incredibly diverse state who attend A&M right now. The people in power don't like that. They removed the polling location. They split Prairie View A&M, an historically Black college, into 2 separate precincts to confuse students about where they are registered to vote and where their polling location is, to devastating effect on impact and voting power. So you make a great point. It may be the answer to my question. Why aren't we seeing the investment in Texas? Maybe the very smart people at the top of the Democratic Party food chain are like, look, we could go into Texas, but what we're going to have to spend and do to get over this voter suppression, to be in 5 very expensive media markets in a state that spans 2 time zones, has 30 million people and 254 counties. We'll just stick to some smaller stuff that's still very important, like Georgia and Arizona, and we'll leave this one down the road. That's why I think, and I tell folks across the state, look, as strong a case as we can make for Texas, there is no cavalry riding to our rescue. This one is on Colin Allred and Michelle Vallejo, who's running for Congress in South Texas. It's on the county commissioner candidates, the state house, state senate candidates, and it's on everyday volunteers who are going out there to register people. We've got to do this, win some big elections, shock the country, and then, I mean, it shouldn't work this way, but it does, and then and only then will they come in and be like, holy shit, Texas, yeah, that's the future. So we've got to do this one on our own.
And I want people who might be wondering why you and I are being so passionate about Texas. It's not just because I'm a very proud Texan, very proud native Texan, as are you. It's because, again, if you win Texas, the Electoral College is done, over, finito. Like, it makes huge difference. And so I want to say, like, we're shouting up.
That's right.
Like, Harris Walz campaign. But if we can just widen our scope, reluctantly so, do you have, besides come to Texas, do you have any other pleas for the Harris Walz campaign? Like, again, I'm trying to get out of my mindset of just like, send Walz to a UT game.
I would say, this is a controversial take. I would send him to the Permian Basin. I'd send him to Friday night football country. And the reason I would do that is there high risk? Absolutely. I don't think we're going to win by being safe. But I think this is where Walz absolutely excels. He's from Permian Basin country in Nebraska and then in Minnesota, where he represented a very rural district. And as you and I know, and many of your listeners and viewers, he was a winning football coach who took a losing program literally to the state championship. I think that connection could just be absolutely wild. And I think it would have to move through, initial confrontation, maybe ambivalence. What is this big city Democrat going to tell me? And Walz, I think, just has one of the most exquisite connections with the people of this country that I've seen from a politician, because he's just never removed himself from those he served. He's never taken the bait of cable TV and internet celebrity and sound bites and bloviating. He's really just been about the work. And for him, pre-politics, the work was social studies, football coach, leader of the Gay Straight Alliance. I think that would be really powerful. But to answer your question, I don't know that that there's really anything that the Harris Walz campaign could do better than what they're doing. Last night's debate was just prime evidence of this. Their fundraising totals, the polling climb until it kind of stalled a little bit after convention. And it stalled a little bit, I think, with America awaiting this moment of revelation. Who is Kamala Harris? Can she stand up to the schoolyard bully? Is she strong enough to do this? One metaphor I want to try out on you. I thought about this last night because I knew I'd be talking to you this morning. Sometimes when I get on an airplane, I'll have a little bit of a rush of anxiety about the fact that my life and the lives of everyone else on this plane are in the hands of the pilot and her co-pilot. And what if that person is sick or has a heart attack or is high or drunk or is, God forbid, suicidal and wants to take everyone with them? There's that infamous story of, I think, a German or an Austrian pilot who flew his plane full of passengers into a mountain. And then I just have to get okay with, you know what, but she's our pilot. And I'm just, I hope the airline has vetted her. I know that she wants to live. I know she's trying to take care of us. This is a tough job. I'm just going to trust her. And I think to some degree, in this perilous moment with every imaginable existential crisis at the forefront, whether it's AI or climate or nuclear weapons, or maybe there's some other stuff that I'm leaving out. We want to know who's going to pilot this plane and whether we can trust them and whether they're going to fly it into a mountain. Is Kamala Harris strong enough to be able to pull up on those controls? Is she steady enough? Is she going to be able to cancel out the noise and focus on the signal and get us to our destination? And by contrast, is Donald Trump, maybe he's racist, maybe he says crazy shit, but isn't he strong? isn't he a big tough guy who's in command and in control, and whatever distractions, he's going to be able to land that plane. For that metaphor for me, based on my recent anxiety of flying, I thought, and it goes to the school of thought that policy and platform and platitudes really don't matter in these debates. You win them by connecting with people who are watching this with the sound off, even, who just want to know that you are confident, in command, and in control. Man, I for one, feel so confident in the next pilot for the United States of America. And I've got to think that the rest of the country, who may have had legitimate open questions about whether she had the character, the steeliness, the resolve, the confidence to do this, I think all of that was answered for us. And so let's see, it's going to be reflected to some degree directionally in the polling. We'll see this in the voter registrations, and I'm going to get back to you with that information here in Texas in terms of the partisan identification of people who are getting registered for the first time post-debate and post-Taylor Swift. But I've got to think that that campaign, primarily Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, but Jen O'Malley Dillon and the entire team that is running this have done better than anyone could have hoped for, dreamed of, or scripted for them. Let's just hope and help them continue that over the course of this until we're celebrating on election night, November 5.
I have some nitpicks with the metaphor.
It's untested. You're dangerous.
I appreciate you. It's safe space. This is a safe space for you to test that stuff out. I would stay away from using the word suicidal in relationship to Kamala Harris at all. But what I do like is the idea, do you want someone who's hopeful or do you want a nihilist as a captain? Because I'll tell you what, Trump is a fucking nihilist.
That's right.
You don't want a nihilist captain. You want someone who's going to see those mountains and actually be like, we can climb them. This is what we're going to do. We have the danger, we have turbulence, whatever. But we, our whole approach to policy and life is to figure it the fuck out, right? Instead of this nihilist whose vision is dark.
He says we're crashing. He's like, this plane sucks. It's a piece of shit. It's crashing into the mountain. Only I.
And I don't care. And I just like, Matt.
Yeah.
Whatever. So I'm helping you workshop the metaphor for when you go on cable. I think pilot metaphor.
This is my off-Broadway kind of working out.
I do, you're a friend of the pod. It would be nice to have you back. I think it's really exciting, and I just appreciate your viewpoint so much because you have been through some races that aren't, quite the same high wire, but have had some of the same twists and turns, let's say. So your viewpoints are valuable. And also, I just love hearing about what's going on the ground with those, 18, 19, 20-year-olds who I do, are my fate is in the hands of the brats, But I like the kids.
The kids are all right.
So thank you so much for coming back. Let's remind everyone, this is my show, 90 Days with Ana Marie Cox, 54 days. But actually, so tell me how many days there are until Texas registration deadline. Can you do that math in your head? Do you know a number?
If you can Google October 7th minus September 11th, that'll get us.
We're just going to go with this. So everyone watching in Texas, This is the deadline to register in Texas. Go to people.
poweredxpeople.org. And if you would like to help us register people, stay in touch with them. You can do it if you're in Texas. You can even do it if you're outside of Texas, because I think Ana made the best case for Texas, not just for the people of Texas. Look, we care about the people of Texas because we live here and we love the people of Texas. But even if you don't care about Texas, what happens in Texas will determine the future, the fate, and the fortune of this country. So if you want to help out, poweredxpeople.org.
Okay, so I made a new sign. So Texas, am I doing that right order? Here we go. Texas voter registration deadline, 26 days.
You have an A+ graphics department working for you.
This is my graphics department. Thank you so much for being on the show again. I really do appreciate it. And for folks who are watching this on YouTube, this is also available as a podcast, and you should rate and review us there. If you were if you're listening, it's available as a YouTube, and you should watch the YouTube because we're so dynamic and expressive, and what a waste that would be for us to have people not see that.
And you're wearing such a cool
you go to
shirt.
YouTube.
I think people need to see the shirt. It's just not the same without the visuals.
So youtube.com/@90days with Ana Marie Cox. And again, we shall be back to next. We have Jane Coaston on Friday from the New York Times. Thanks again.
Adios.
While we have been talking, somebody's just handed me something, and I'm going to do sort of a not very TV thing, and I'm going to read it to you in totality. I'm going to read you the whole thing because this was, I don't think you know about this, but this was just posted online by a woman you might have heard of whose name is Taylor Swift. And she has posted this online along with a photo of her cat. And I'm going to read to you what she just posted. Quote, like many of you, I watched the debate tonight. If you haven't already, now is a great time to do your research on the issues at hand and the stances these candidates take on the topics that matter to you the most. As a voter, I make sure to watch and read everything I can about their proposed policies and plans for this country. Recently, I was made aware that AI of me, quote, me, falsely endorsing Donald Trump's presidential run was posted to his site. It really conjured up my fears around AI and the dangers of spreading misinformation. It brought me to the conclusion that I need to be very transparent about my actual plans for this election as a voter. The simplest way to combat misinformation is with the truth. Then she says, quote, I will be casting my vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the 2024 presidential election. I'm voting for Kamala Harris because she fights for the rights and causes I believe need a warrior to champion them. I think she is a steady-handed, gifted leader, and I believe we can accomplish so much more in this country if we're led by calm and not chaos. I was so heartened and impressed by her selection of running mate Tim Walz, who has been standing up for LGBTQ plus rights, IVF, and a woman's right to her own body for decades. I've done my research, and I've made my choice. Your research is all yours to do, and the choice is yours to make. I also want to say, especially to first-time voters, remember that in order to vote, you have to be registered. I also find it's much easier to vote early. I will link where to register and find early voting dates and info in my story. With love and hope, Taylor Swift, signed Childless Cat Lady. I have to get your response to that, Mr. Governor.
All those things, I am incredibly grateful, first of all, to Taylor Swift. I say that also as a cat owner.